specifically Houston at 7 o'clock, where it will match up with 23 other aircraft and be able to take you to all of those cities that I showed. Large aircraft for the longer services. This airline going to do in Montgomery, a little teaser. We have a corporate planning department in our offices in Houston, and they've been watching Montgomery's growth, the expansion of industry, the movement of people into the area. And as an airline that has basically served the western part of the United States, we wanted to tie in now to the southeastern Sunbelt area, and certainly Montgomery is where we want to be.
For almost 3 weeks, Governor Wallace has been in UAB's medical center undergoing treatment for severe pains associated with his paralysis. For 2 weeks, Governor Wallace has been undergoing an exercise program, which his personal physician, Dr. Thomas James, said is a renewal of a program designed to tone up muscles which support his damaged spine. Dr. James said the governor's pain came from his not keeping up his exercise program during the campaign. But during the 2-week period, 2 dates, including today, have been issued as possible release times, but the governor remains in the hospital.
He's got to have some therapy equipment put together for the matching, which he wants to ensure that that is done. From the onset, we've told you that the governor wants to ensure as much as he possibly can that when he leaves the hospital, he's ready to go back to work. And I'm not going to say that the dreary weather that we're facing didn't have a little bit to do with it as well.
Mr. Camp says the governor continues to meet with some visitors who pass through a screen of security checkpoints, but not until today has a member of the press been allowed to meet with the governor. But early this afternoon, I visited briefly with Governor Wallace. In that meeting, we talked a little bit about the upcoming legislative session, about the state of the economy, and even the weather. The governor was out of bed, sitting up, and surrounded by a number of small exercise machines and devices. The governor's color appeared good, and his speech articulate, although a little slow. He appeared to be a little bit tired. The governor says his acute pain is under control, but he says he still suffers from some minor pain that's associated with his condition. Other visitors today included Senator Earl Goodwin, the governor's Senate floor leader, who will handle much of the governor's legislative program. Mr. Camp says he now expects the governor to be released Monday, although he says there is a chance the governor could go home this weekend. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News in Birmingham at the UAB Medical Center.
The legislative chambers won't be empty for long. The youth legislature is in town. 550 teenagers are going to put their high school civics lessons to work. During the next 3 days, the students will sit where our legislators normally sit, debate the pros and cons of bills they've written, and really try out the democratic process.
Leadership development, I guess, is the key to the whole program. The best way to learn it is to experience it.
A lot of the bills deal with what the teenagers know best, school. If one youth legislator had her way, there would be a 4-day school week. Another wants to legalize Bermuda shorts in the schools. But on the more serious side, a Daleville student is going to argue for mandatory drug searches in the schools.
It would be a very drastic step, but, you know, like President Reagan said, we need drastic measures to stop drugs from tearing the United States apart.
The teenagers aren't afraid to tackle the kind of issues that keep our regular legislators going around in circles, like education funding, welfare, and school prayer. One student even wants to limit Alabama governors to 2 terms.
For instance, the President of the United States can only serve 2 terms, and I think it's just, you know, a good idea to limit the authority that one person in the state can have.
At 7 tonight, the students will be in the House chambers for a welcome by Lieutenant Governor Bill Baxley. Then they'll get to work on those bills we talked about. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
Wants to go do a full day of business in New Orleans, certainly can do it, be done. Obviously you can do a full day's work. Service will be different in that we will take you from Montgomery directly west to New Orleans. Large aircraft for Mexico. We are the largest U.S. carrier.
Based upon a round-trip purchase.
We have a corporate planning department in our offices in Houston, and they've been watching Montgomery's growth, the expansion of industry, the movement of people into the area. And as an airline that has basically served the western part of the United States, we wanted to tie in now to the southeastern Sunbelt area, and certainly Montgomery is where we want to be.
Troopers from across the country have the chance to see the latest in weapons, protection devices, and equipment at today's meeting. Dealers say officers want the best equipment. After all, the officer's life may depend on it. While a trooper's life may rest with the weapon he carries, the life of the Troopers Coalition depends on political firepower.
I'm sorry that our country has gotten to the point that we are, in law enforcement, placed in a position to be supernatural human beings.
The troopers found a friend with Attorney General Charles Graddick, who endorsed several planks of their platform for public safety, like calling for a shorter appeals process.
When a criminal can keep a case on appeal for 8 or 9 years, then the system is sick.
While Mr. Graddick agrees with the coalition that every state should have a death penalty, he doesn't favor death by lethal injection.
Why put somebody to sleep who has tortured someone, who has taken their lives in a vicious manner? Why give them the opportunity to simply go to sleep?
The Trooper Coalition was founded in 1977 with 4 member states. Since then, it has grown to 32 states. And with the support of politicians like Attorney General Charles Graddick, they hope soon that all 50 states will be represented. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
The size of the automobiles have been getting smaller and smaller. The size of the trucks are getting larger and larger, and this differential in the size and the weight of these vehicles trying to compete on the highways at the same speed, I think is very dangerous. We've got some bridges that's 18 feet wide on some of these roads. These trucks will be allowed to be 8.5 feet wide, and that doesn't include the safety equipment. The stability of these trucks, in my opinion, will be quite less than what it is now with the one-trailer type tractor truck. And I just see no way that our injuries and fatalities are not going to substantially increase because of this regulation.
In the House chambers tonight, 600 students of and 1 veteran of the democratic process. Lieutenant Governor Bill Baxley opened the 1983 Youth Legislature with some words of advice. Don't be afraid to try new things, and don't let young age keep you from speaking out.
One of you in here may come up with an idea that nobody else has thought of that'll make our state, maybe even our whole country, maybe even our world, a little bit better. Congratulations to you for being here. It shows that you're leaders. I want to take my hat off to you and salute you and tell you we're going to be watching you and listening, and I hope we'll be learning from you. And maybe that we can put some of the ideas that you bring up here into practice next week after next when we come back in session. Congratulations again, and thank you.
The teenagers are going to learn how the laws of the state are made. For the next 3 days, they'll follow actual legislative rules, debate and dispose of bills they've drafted themselves. And no issue is too tough for these young legislators. Their mock legislation deals with welfare and budget problems, drunk driving and drugs in the schools, and even smaller problems, like wearing Bermuda shorts to school. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
As if you didn't already know, Alabama football's in for a big change this season. No longer will you see plays like this out of the wishbone offense that led the Crimson Tide to unprecedented success through the past decade. New coach Ray Perkins has changed the offense to more of a pro set. And nearing the halfway point of spring practice, the coach is pleased with the progress of the changeover.
We did some things in the running game. We did some things in the passing game very well. We did both in both running game and passing game poor. But as long as we keep working at it with the attitude that our players are going about it with, which is nothing less than great, really, I think we'll get there.
As spring began, Perkins listed defense as his top priority. Finding replacements for 7 graduated starters concerned him, and it still does.
Defensive secondary is still up in the air. You know, the whole thing is up in the air, but I feel good that we'll be able to put a winning football team from a front 7 standpoint defensively. And hopefully some young people will come along for us in the secondary.
I think the key thing as we look through, especially these last 11, 12 practices of spring, is how healthy can we stay to get the people work that, you know, we think are going to be doing the playing.
Without a doubt, we've got some great athletes back there in the secondary. Like I said, it's just going to be the experience next year that's going to tell whether we're going to be good or not. I think we'll do real well.
Alabama will have 21 days to get in their remaining 11 spring practice sessions, and you can observe the Crimson Tide firsthand at the annual A-Day game Saturday, April 16th. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports in Tuscaloosa.
The Houston-based firm recently marked its 50th year of service, and with 11,000 employees serving 108 cities, it's the 6th largest airline in the country. Initially, Continental will schedule 2 flights on DC-9s each day to and from Danley Field, making connections in New Orleans and then on to points west. Continental Vice President John Asma says his company is excited about coming to Montgomery.
Continental Airlines is basically based in the western part of the United States, and we noticed that you had no direct service from Montgomery to the west. So by coming to Montgomery, we give you direct service into Houston, where we can give you the connections to about 60 cities.
The company is also offering discount fares through June 15th, including a $69 one-way ticket to New Orleans. I'm Bob Howell, WSFA TV News.
George parked in the wrong place, and Margaret came in and said, "Go move."
Express his deep and sincere appreciation for contributions that your company is making in our state and in Marion, and the fact that you located here during his prior administration, and now that you are expanding your firm, and what it means to the economy of that area.
Is this a big event? Governor, how do you feel? I'm feeling fine, and glad to be out of the hospital, of course, and on the way back to Montgomery.
Why did
doing
you
fine.
Why did you come to the hospital?
Well, I came to the hospital because I had a little increase in pain, and I'm doing better now.
Were there any side effects of the medication? Anything that worried you?
Yeah.
Governor, did you come to the hospital to get off of the medication, the painkillers?
No. All you got to do is go ask any doctor that handled me. Son, I was reputable in Alabama, and that's not the case. So, folks, thank you all here. I'm glad to be out of the hospital, and
Doc, can you get that coffee?
It's going to be just. I didn't know you had so many radio stations up here. Thank all of you here.
Heavy rains that invaded Montgomery last night and this morning is causing several minor flooding problems in the city. A thunderstorm dumped 1 3/4 inches of rain on Montgomery in a 40-minute period today. Drainage ditches clogged with trash turned some streets into small rivers and front yards into lakes in South Montgomery. Flooding is already occurring on some portions of Catoma Creek, and a flood warning was issued for the creek about 40 minutes ago. The National Weather Service says Catoma Creek should crest at 26 feet tomorrow. Several residents along the creek are threatened at 24 feet. The water came up over a portion of Janetta Ditch today, blocking traffic to Watley Road. Mr. Lloyd Palmer, who lives near Watley Road, says he had to evacuate part of his livestock when the water flooded his front yard.
I come out here this morning about 6 o'clock and I seen the water. I was fixing to rise, get over that bridge. I had to go to the store, get some milk for cereal. And I got back about an hour later, it was underwater. I had to do something because my chickens was flooding out and it come up over knee high on me.
Mr. Palmer says he's getting ready to evacuate himself if the rains continue. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
Members of the media were given a few hours' notice that the governor was planning to leave the hospital. The waiting media was corralled outside. The governor appeared pleased about the waiting crowd and his release.
I'm feeling fine and glad to be out of the hospital, of course, and on the way back to Montgomery.
Why did you come to the hospital?
Well, I came to the hospital because I had a little increase in pain, and I'm doing better now.
Were there any side effects of the medication, anything that worried you?
No.
Governor, did you come to the hospital to get off of the medication, the painkillers?
No. All you got to do is go ask any doctor that handled me. So I know it's reputable in Alabama, and that's not the case.
Press Secretary Billy Joe Camp says the governor and his doctors were ready for his release.
It was felt that had reached the point in time that he could go home and could continue to progress from home as well as he could here.
The governor's been on an exercise program to tone up lower back muscles, blamed for increasing the governor's pain by not properly supporting his damaged spine. Mr. Camp says the governor will likely take a break from his exercise this weekend, but pick it up next week as he returns to work. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News in Birmingham.
The heavy thunderstorms that hit Montgomery last night and this morning dumped better than 3 3/4 inches of rain on the city in a 24-hour period ending at 11 o'clock this morning. At one point, better than 1 3/4 inches fell within a 40-minute period, closing at least a half dozen roads in the city. Authorities say much of the flooding problems in residential areas was caused by storm drains that were blocked with trash and debris. City crews were able to clear the drains and allow the water to drain off. Only a few houses in the city actually had water inside, but buildings near Katoma Creek were not so lucky. Weather Service officials are keeping a close watch on the creek. It's expected to crest at 26 feet tomorrow. Flooding of some streets and houses along the creek starts at 24 feet. Farmers and ranchers were by far the hardest hit by the rains. Several creeks were out of their banks, flooding crop and pasture lands, forcing livestock to move to higher ground. Lloyd Palmer, who lives near Watley Road in Montgomery, had to move his chickens out of his front yard this morning when the water reached waist high in the chicken pen. He had to evacuate his own house 4 years ago, and he says he's prepared to do it again.
I'm getting prepared to move out, yes, sir. I'm getting prepared to move out.
How do you feel about that?
I don't. I figure if the water comes to my house, I'm going to lose everything we got.
Not all the damage has been caused by rain. Heavy winds blew down a hay barn and livestock shed on Woodley Road this morning.
Hundreds of teenagers from across the state are trying out the seats of power in the legislative chambers at the state capitol. And one of the best-known pastimes of real lawmakers is extensive debate on almost any issue. Members of the YMCA Youth Legislature are wading knee-deep into subjects like legalizing Bermuda shorts in school. During this Senate debate on that issue, one youth lawmaker pointed out that shorts are no more distracting than the outfits worn by cheerleaders or those taking physical education classes. The bill eventually passed. The Senate also passed a bill requiring 18-year-old males applying for state financial aid for college to register for the draft. A Senate bill providing for a fully funded kindergarten program wasn't so lucky. Senators turned that bill down because of a lack of money. The Alabama legislature has its problems keeping a quorum, and so did the members participating in this House discussion. But the teenagers solved their problem with a move some state lawmakers probably haven't even thought of yet. They suspended the rules and gave the pages the right to vote on and debate bills. Some of the bills the House considered included one to license medical and x-ray technicians in the state, and another to mandate first aid and CPR training for public school employees. Both of these bills passed. The youth legislature is scheduled to continue through this weekend. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
3 3/4 inches of rain that fell in Montgomery in a 24-hour period ending at 11 o'clock this morning turned several city streets into small streams, creeks into rivers, and front yards into lakes. For the most part, the water stayed in the streets, except for a few low-lying areas near creeks. City officials blamed trash-clogged storm drains for the flooding problems in most residential areas, but it was the overflow from creek beds that caused farmers and ranchers to move their livestock and farm equipment to higher ground. A flood warning is in effect for Katoma Creek. Officials with the National Weather Service say the creek will crest tomorrow 2 feet above where some homes and streets start flooding. Flooding along the Alabama River is expected to be confined to pasture and croplands. Alabama Power Company officials say the situation at dams are stable, but there is a possibility that some floodgates will be opened at Lake Martin. That decision will be made in the next 24 to 48 hours, and Power Company officials say they'll let residents downstream and the news media know if floodgates are open. For now, it appears that central Alabama was spared the type of flooding that occurred in Louisiana and Mississippi, but flood conditions could change with additional heavy rains. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
A small black community in the tip of Henry County buried 2 of its own today.
Every decent man and woman of every race suffers today.
The family and friends of 19-year-old Anthony Charles Rousseau and his older brother, 33-year-old Hamp Rousseau, are still trying to figure out why the 2 died. Authorities say the elder Rousseau resisted arrest for reckless driving and grabbed and fired a Eufaula police officer's gun.
The investigation is like any other investigation. Witnesses have been talked to, physical evidence has been gathered, sent to the laboratory.
District Attorney Tom Sorrells is handling the Rousseau case. He says he wants to proceed swiftly, but be thorough.
The only thing a prosecutor can do is try to find out what the truth is. And that takes work, and it takes common sense, and it takes not jumping to any conclusions one way or the other. So that's what we're attempting to do.
Eufaula Police Chief Kenneth Walker described Saturday night's confrontation as tragic. He also says his officer was attacked and shot at by the Rousseau brothers.
We regret it happened. It's a tragic thing for our city. We regret it for the family, and we also have sympathy for the officer's sake. It was just appears to be he was shooting for his life, between a matter of life and death.
There were about 500 people at the funeral, including 3 busloads of students from Tuskegee Institute. A student leader said they came to let the world know they won't forget or ignore the deaths of Tuskegee freshman Charles Rousseau and his brother.
Tuskegee Institute is very sick right now. It's hurt. It feels bad. And something's going to have to be done about it.
Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News in Henry County.
It's Alabama and Mississippi State head-to-head for the Southeastern Conference Western Division leadership this weekend in Tuscaloosa. State leads the division with a 9-2 mark, 21-6 overall, while Alabama is 6-3 and 20-4. Needless to say, it's a crucial series. Just ask Thai coach Barry Schallenberger.
I think what makes this particular series so important, it will go a long way toward deciding which teams can determine their own destiny. I think at the end of this weekend, we'll find out whether we need to just worry about ourselves or worry about somebody else knocking off Mississippi State.
Alabama traditionally has always had problems with State. Earlier this year, the Tide dropped 2 on the Bulldogs' home field.
Well, they've got an awfully good offensive team. And they're always sound defensively. Any Ron Polk coach team that I've ever seen has been. And their pitching is good enough. Teams are able to score some runs off them, but not many teams are able to score enough.
Weather permitting, the 3-game series will begin tomorrow night in Tuscaloosa with a doubleheader at 6. A single game will follow Sunday at 2. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
There were newspaper reports that Schleister was being charged $10,000 a week in interest on his gambling debts. The Baltimore Colts reserve quarterback was in his rookie year in the NFL. The Boston Globe newspaper says that's when he started placing bets on sporting events with 4 Baltimore bookmakers. By March, according to a copyright story in the Baltimore Evening Sun, Schleister was $159,000 in debt. Last Friday at the Columbus, Ohio airport, the FBI arrested 3 of the alleged bookies in a sting operation. Schleister had complained to the FBI that he was being threatened. The 4th man was arrested in Maryland. Stories of football players associating with gamblers have plagued the NFL for years. In 1963, Paul Hornung of the Green Bay Packers and Detroit Lions lineman Alex Karras were suspended for a year after betting on NFL games. In 1969, Joe Namath was threatened with suspension because of his part ownership of a restaurant in which gambling had taken place. Namath sold his share of the restaurant. Paragraph 15 of every NFL player's contract states the commissioner can fine, suspend, or terminate a player who knowingly associates with gamblers or gambling activity. Commissioner Pete Rozell's office today said it had been in touch with Art Schleister, who is in protective custody. His lawyer issued a statement saying none of the charges involve any football games in which Schleister or any team of which he was a member participated. Schleister was a star player for 4 years at Ohio State University, setting all kinds of school records on his way to becoming an All-American.
Top of the first, the visiting Padres hit Rick Camp for a run. 2 outs, Terry Kennedy loops one off Camp's glove. Gene Richards scampers home from third. San Diego up 1-0. Bottom of the 5th, the Braves retaliate off Eric Schau. Runners on first and second. Brett Butler lines one over second. Bruce Benedict circles third to tie the game at 1. The next batter's Rafael Ramirez. He singles up the middle. That scores Camp from third, and the Braves led it 2-1. The Pods tied it in the 6th, but the Braves put it away with 2 in the 8th. Runners on second and third, and Benedict lofts one to left. Gene Richards with a long run just misses the catch. It goes as a double. Chris Chambliss scores to make it 3-2. Brett Butler then grounds into a fielder's choice, scoring Glenn Hubbard here. Braves win the home opener 4-2 over San Diego. They go to 2-1 on the season. Rick Pons, WSFA TV Sports.
Evans still has several avenues of appeals of the sentence through state and federal courts, but a spokesman for the Attorney General's office says Attorney General Charles Graddick will oppose any clemency efforts by Governor Wallace and any other efforts by Evans to escape the death sentence through appeals. Reports of Evans' plea for clemency conflicts directly with what he told me in March of 1979 when I talked with him at Holman Prison a few feet away from the electric chair.
Is there any chance that you may ask the governor to commute your sentence before April 6th?
None whatsoever.
None whatsoever?
No.
Evans came within 6 hours of execution on April 6, 1979, when U.S. Supreme Court Justice William Rehnquist granted a stay. The Alabama Prison Project has sent a letter to Governor George Wallace requesting clemency for Evans. Project Director Kathy Anseles.
The Alabama Prison Project has sent a letter to Governor Wallace asking him to commute to life the sentence of John Evans. We are also calling upon all people who truly value the sanctity of human life to ask the governor for mercy.
The last execution in Alabama was in 1965. Opponents of the death penalty fear the sentence Evans faces will be the first to be carried out in Alabama in 19 years. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
We know that the taking of Eddie Nasser's life was a tragedy, and we feel that this type of action should be punished, but we feel it would be a double tragedy for John Evans's life to be taken as well. The suffering that Nasser's family has experienced and the suffering of the friends and the family of John Evans' family has gone on for too long, and there's no need for more pain.
The Alabama and Tallapoosa rivers have reached flood stages, and the water is still rising. The Alabama waters have hit about 42 feet, some 7 feet above flood stage, and the Weather Service is expecting a sharp rise in the lower Tallapoosa because several gates have been opened at Martin Dam. The rivers are expected to get to their high points late tonight or early tomorrow. The Weather Service says the Alabama should crest at 45 or 46 feet. All this means that some street and residential flooding is possible by early morning in North Montgomery.
The equivalent flood to that was in March of 1979 when the river got up to 46.3 feet.
What happened in '79? What kind of things did we see?
In part of North Montgomery, some street flooding was occurred, and also maybe a few houses had a little bit of water in the lower stories, but not a lot of flooding at 46 feet. The farmlands and the low-lying lands that the farmers use, of course, will be flooded.
Selma's troubles won't start until tomorrow night or early Monday. When the Alabama River crests there may be some residential flooding in the Blackwell Bend area. In the meantime, what do you do when the rain stops? Fish the swollen creeks, of course.
Hey, how's the fishing today?
Oh, it hasn't been too well. I think probably the unsettled weather has kept it down. I was just going to stay a little while and then go back home and do my honeydews this afternoon.
And the good news is there's no rain in the forecast for Alabama for the next couple of days. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
The teenaged House members passed several non-controversial bills, including a law requiring all handicapped people to have a special license tag, and a bill requiring motor vehicle manufacturers to replace or refund the price of a motor vehicle which has been repaired 4 times for the same problem. Of course, no car dealer lobbyists were there to stop passage of the consumer-oriented bill. But one not-so-controversial bill passed in the House and then was narrowly defeated in the Senate by a 36-31 vote. The bill would have legalized all forms of gambling in the state, and its proponents said it would solve the state's unemployment problems. But Youth Senator Carter Dukes of Opelika disagreed.
We may be getting a lot of revenue, but we're also going to increase our crime rate and all this other stuff.
The high schoolers wound up their session by thanking the man who had made it possible, YMCA coordinator Bill Behringer. His gift, a belly dancer who was a former YMCA delegate.
You don't really learn anything unless you do it. You can read it in a textbook, you can study all you want, but unless you actually participate, it never has the real meaning to you. And these young people are really learning how the government works by actually going through the process of how a bill is made and how it's passed and all the work involved.
The young senators and representatives will attend an awards luncheon tomorrow afternoon and then head back to their districts. Lisa Walsh, WSFA TV News.
Thou hast afflicted us, and the years wherein we have seen evil.
And because my Bible teaches me that God is always on the side of the humble and the oppressed.
We want to let the world know that we are not going to be complacent. We're not going to be laid back. We're going to be rather vigorous, though we will be systematic in our approach. We're going to be rather vigorous to finding the truth. And from what I've heard thus far, the truth seems to be something that it hasn't been brought out yet. I hear conflicting stories.
Top of the first, Atlanta tags the count. John Montefusco for 3 runs. The first comes on this single by Dale Murphy. 3 Padres collide going after it. Nobody can get it. Rafael Ramirez will score all the way from first. 1-0 Braves. Bob Horner then follows with his first home run of the year. The 2-run shot to deep left is just inside the foul pole. 3-0 Atlanta after 1. They took a 4-0 lead to the third when San Diego gets a pair off Phil Necro. The first came on a sacrifice fly. Then Juan Bonilla lashes this single to left. That scores Luis Salazar to make it 4-2. Bottom of the fourth now, Bruce Benedict leads off with his first homer of the year. A solo blast to left. That made it 5-2 Atlanta. But the Padres tied it in the 5th with 3. Runners on first and second, the $6 million man, Steve Garvey, lines one past Horner at third. That scores Mike Flannery to make it 5-3. Terry Kennedy then follows with a routine grounder to first, but the usually reliable Chris Chambliss lets it roll right between his legs. Garvey and Bonilla score. It's a brand new game tied at 5. And that's where it stood until the 9th when 2 Padre errors put runners on the corners with no outs. Pinch hitter Bob Watson then tags Chris Welch with this high bouncer over third. Glenn Hubbard scores the winning run. Braves take it 6-5 and win their 3rd straight after the opening day loss.
I was out warming up this morning, and I sort of, as I got through the driver, I knew that it was not right, so I just told Willie, I said, Willie, I'm going to walk around, get to the putting green, and try to get this thing loosened up before I hurt myself. And I got to the putting green, and I couldn't really bend over to hit a putt. And so I hit a few putts, sort of stand a little straight up, and I walked around a little bit, and I came in and I got a hold of Dr. Reynolds and Dr. Hastings here and ask him for something that I could take that maybe get me started and get loosened up as we went around the round, and without affecting my mind. You know, obviously I want to keep myself clear, but so I went out of on the 10th tee, and I said, well, I've got to hit a ball, so I took a couple practice swings, and about the third practice swings, it just spasmed up. So.
Heavy rains were drenching the golfers and the gallery again today after yesterday's second round was washed out completely. The great Sam Snead, playing in his final Masters, has withdrawn, but Slammin' Sammy Snead went out in style. Five-time Masters champion Jack Nicklaus forced to withdraw today after suffering back spasms. Meanwhile, Gil Morgan took the outright lead here at the 12th hole with this birdie putt. That put him at 6 under par. Here's Tom Kite on the 16th hole. He was 2 under par at the time, but watch this shot by Tom Kite to the par 3 hole. The ball lands just behind the pin and rolls back. He almost got the ace, but settled for the birdie. Defending champion Craig Stadler still in the hunt. Here at 13, he sinks a birdie putt to go 4 under par. As the rains continue at the Masters, Lee Trevino tries to make the best of it.
The shooting took place on Hall Street near Adams Avenue shortly after 11:30 last night. Montgomery Police Chief Charles Wendell says that investigator R.A. Connor shot 23-year-old Bobby Joe Sales once in the lower back.
The investigator says he challenged the subject to stop. He refused to do so, appeared to be reaching for a weapon as he was running. The investigator fired one shot. No weapon was found at the scene. Sales was running from the area of the wide receiver lounge at the time of the shooting.
Chief Swindle declined further comment on the case. Authorities did not disclose why the detective was in the area or if Sales was wanted by police. Witnesses on the scene say that 2 or 3 men were standing in front of the club, and when the unmarked police car pulled up, they ran across the street for an alleyway. Witnesses say a white male in a suit jumped out of the car, ran around in back of the vehicle, and fired one shot at the men who were headed toward the alleyway. There were conflicting reports from witnesses on the scene whether or not police officers told the men to stop. The shooting sparked a rock and bottle throwing spree by a group of 30 to 40 people who gathered around the shooting scene. Some police cars were hit by the flying objects, and additional backup police and K-9 units were called to the area. Hospital officials say that Sales is listed in fair condition in the intensive care unit of Baptist Medical Center.
Well, number one, I'm calling for the suspension of the police officer or officers involved. I think that that's the only right thing for the Montgomery Police Department, the mayor, and the chief to do. And I certainly hope that they would refrain from making statements such as they did this afternoon on TV saying that the individual appeared to be going for a gun, because it doesn't do anything but upset the people in that area who were there and know full well that this individual did not go for a gun. As a matter of fact, he didn't even have a gun in his possession.
Certainly, I think that all citizens, both black and white, should remain calm and should not recoil to violence. If you do that, that would be in violation of Martin Luther King's philosophy of nonviolence until we can see what happened. And certainly let the problems be solved through legal, legislative, the city council, FBI, and the Justice Department here in the city of Montgomery.
The director of the Veterans Administration Regional Office, who spoke to the former POWs and the families of those still missing in action, said that we are in the age of the anti-hero and that self-sacrifice to one's country is a dying virtue. In a statement apparently aimed at Americans who support a nuclear freeze and cuts in the defense budget, Director Jim Conway said he was alarmed at their increasing numbers.
In violation of fundamental... I do not share the belief of those who say it was not our fight. Instead, I find cause for concern over the seemingly increasing number of Americans who, by word and deed, support a more passive national policy.
But a former POW who served in Vietnam said that he believed that deep down the American people appreciate their country, especially in wartime.
But when we are threatened, as the POWs were, we find that there are some things more important than living the good life.
At the end of the lieutenant colonel's speech, the Alabama Air National Guard flew over in the missing man flyby formation. to remind everyone of the 2,000 servicemen still listed as missing in action in Southeast Asia. Lisa Walsh, WSFA TV News.
We need to remember that unity above self.
Doctors say Truman Capote is alert now and in good condition, but the rider had a bad night. Capote checked into the Madison Hotel last night. He called for help around 2:30 this morning. Assistant hotel manager Tom Peake.
Mr. Capote requested that, or told one of our security officers that he was feeling kind of dizzy and had stomach cramps. And like any of our guests, we called the paramedics to make sure that you know, anything that's reported like that, we do our best to help them. And the paramedics arrived, I think, within just a few minutes.
Capote's doctor at the medical center says his confusion and dizziness came from a toxic level of medication.
In contacting his physician in New York, it was apparent that Mr. Capote has had a history of seizures for approximately 2 years. His present medications are dilantin and phenobarbital. It was found on blood testing in the emergency room that one of these medications were in a toxic range, and this produced his symptoms.
Dr. Edwards says this toxic imbalance isn't the same as a drug overdose, and it's not uncommon for seizure patients. Dr. Edwards expects Capote to stay in the hospital several days so doctors can run tests and regulate his medication.
We feel that Mr. Capote will respond very appropriately to adjusting his medication at this time. We do not expect him to have a prolonged hospitalization here.
Capote became an overnight success in 1948 with the publication of Other Voices, Other Rooms. He also wrote the bestsellers In Cold Blood and Breakfast at Tiffany's. It's not known why Capote was in Montgomery. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
Things got rolling for Atlanta in the second. Bob Horner walks, then goes to third on this error by Steve Garvey, who's trying for the double play off the bat of Chris Chambliss. Bruce Benedict then comes to the plate. His sacrifice fly goes to deep left center. Horner will tag and score. The Braves go up 1-0. In the San Diego third, after a Luis Salazar single and a steal, Glenn Hubbard can't handle the hot shot on a sharply hit ball by Gene Richards. Salazar scores all the way from second to tie the game at 1. Bottom of the third, the Braves chalk up another one on this short hit by Dale Murphy. No play at home as Claudell Washington scores. 2-1 Braves. The Padres get another in the fourth to tie it again, but the Braves go up for good in the fifth on this two-run homer by Murphy. The first of the year for the Murph. 4-2 Braves, where it stays until the eighth. The Padres will score another one. Sixto Lescano rips one past Rafael Ramirez at short. Garvey motors home from second to make it a 4-3 game. But the Pods would get no more, and the Braves make it 3 straight over San Diego and 4 in a row after the opening day loss to Cincinnati.
Round 3 of the Masters. This is Jody Mudd, the low amateur last year at the Masters. This year he's a pro, and he's doing well. Jody Mudd stands at 4 under par, along with this man, Tom Watson, who had a 71 today. Watson within striking distance, 2 shots back. Arnold Palmer struggled early today and finished with a 76, but when the television cameras caught up with Palmer, he came alive like days of old. On 13, Palmer with the eagle from 35 feet. Raymond Floyd, another former winner of this event, scored a 1 under par 71 to keep a share of the lead. Here at the par 3 12th hole, a beautiful shot within a foot of the hole. He got a sure birdie. Gil Morgan held a 1-stroke lead after round 2, but he had lots of problems in today's round. Morgan with the shot out of Rays Creek, one of his best of the day. He finished with a 76, 3 shots back. And then the defending champion, Craig Stadler, had the best round of the day, 3 under par 69. Here at the 17th, he rolls it in for birdie and a share of the lead, heading into round 4 tomorrow.
It was not a good start for the Stallions. First possession, Reggie Collier back in the lineup after being out several weeks with a hip pointer is intercepted here by former Tennessee star Eddie Brown. The turnover set up a Chicago field goal. Frank Corral, the former Rams kicker, boots it through from 20 yards out. 3-0 blitz after the first quarter. A 42-yarder by Corral made it 6-0 before the Stallions got it going in the second. Collier caps a scoring drive with this nice misdirection play from 11 yards out. The point after was blocked, and they went to the locker room tied at 6. Third quarter now, blitz took the lead for good. Tim Spencer sweeps left in for a 2-yard score. 5:50 left in the quarter, 13-6 Chicago. But back came Birmingham. After a safety cut it to 13-8, the Stallions threatened to take the lead and appeared to on this third down play when Collier, out of the scramble, connects with Jim Smith on a touchdown pass. But Collier was past the line of scrimmage. Loss of down, and Birmingham had to settle for this 36-yard Scott Norwood field goal to make it 13-11 with 8:50 remaining. The blitz then put it away with an 80-yard drive that consumed 7 minutes. Kevin Long took it over from the 1. Chicago added a late safety, and the blitz celebrate a 22-11 win over Birmingham.